cat. What's going on? I just wanted to do a quick video just talking about what's been going on with the Nova. Obviously, this is a very large project. This is anything but simple, putting a Japanese engine in an American muscle car. But I've been doing a lot of work and I haven't actually been filming all of it. And I kind of feel bad about that because I really wanted to make like a video for most of what I'm doing on the car. But practically speaking, making a video by myself, the way that I do it, it's a pretty simple setup with just my phone and simple editing and such. So it's not really easy to pump out stuff, you know, like other YouTubers and such do. Some of my friends of mine do it. And, you know, I just keep things simple. So I wanted to kind of make a catch-up video and kind of show where I'm at right now. So I know one of my last videos I talked about how I moved and now I have a full-size garage to work in, and I was able to get my intercooler mounted on the core support, and if you notice, the core support and the whole front end of the car are off once again. So where I'm at now is, well, a couple different things. I've removed the heater core and blower motor and all that. That's gone. I have a delete plate that's going to basically blank that out once I figure out the best way to install it. Core support, like I said, all that is pretty much set to go. I've drilled and, I've cut out holes for the intercooler piping and made intercooler and intake piping. They're kind of strewn about my shelves here. This is my my system of organizing parts for this swap, actually. All the JZ specific stuff is on the right-hand side and a couple bits down here. And then I have parts that are mostly stock stuff that I've taken off that I may or may not use, or other stuff that's also takeoffs that I'm not using. Those are my old little kind of rally pack gauges. I got my headlight surrounds over there. And then I have some stuff that I'm trying to figure out if I'll be able to use it long term. Some stuff that I bought in the past for this car that I never got to install because they're pretty race car, you know, for a pedal set, master cylinders and such. I'm still using the stock pedals, and this is I think a Chevy Vega or something master cylinder, but it's still a Chevy stock style with the booster and all that. I've installed my McLeod with Wilwood cylinder, master cylinder. McLeod hydraulic clutch master cylinder conversion setup. Comes with a -4 AN line, and it basically uses a stock pedal. And you can see I've got things kind of torn apart in here. It's a stock pedal that basically just changes the geometry a bit and has a better setup for the push rod. And in the interior, I've been working on getting my tonneau cover all set up, as well as a patch panel for the hole that I had cut previously when I first did the 4-speed swap, because this car was originally auto when I got it. And I've got things pretty much all set to go for that, but I can't install it just yet because I need to get this piece made in metal first and a couple of bits finished up with it before I can bolt that in, because that is going to hard mount the shifter to the chassis, and I have to make sure the geometry is squared up and all ready to go. This doesn't have a bushing installed right now. This is just a test setup 3D printed part that my buddy was able to 3D print for me. I've also got my electrical system going. I've got the battery mounted in the back. I'll show that in a bit. But I've got my positive cable running down the side of the car. I've got new sill plates that'll cover this side and the driver's side. Actually, there's already some wiring, the stock wiring that runs through here. I'm going to run some stuff from like the fuel pump and such that, again, I'll show in a second. But I got to finish running that. It's going to come down. It's going to mount to the side, actually, of the tunnel with some hardware and such. And it's going to go into my kill switch. I got a big, just like a master throw shutoff switch and some auxiliary switches for things. It's basically going to be ECU, fuel pump, fans, and then, you know, a couple other things that I have options for. Starter button, real race car. This console is from Speedway. It's pretty handy, and it's just going to mount right here in between the seats. Everything will be accessible and safe. That's a big thing, is that I want a master cutoff that's accessible when I have my shoulder harnesses strapped in, because in the past I was not even able to reach the shifter that I had in the car with the shoulder straps in, so I didn't really use them very often. Not the safest thing, I will be honest, but these cars only came with a lap belt from the factory anyway, so it's not like it's any really less safe than stock, except for the roll bar, which isn't padded. I probably should pad it. That's a whole debate for another time, though. Passenger seat, of course, is out, and to get more room for electrical and such. Speaking of electrical, on the stock chassis side, you saw my stock fuse boxes hanging out in there, and that's all going to stay basically as is. The only thing I'm using that for is essentially the front and rear end lights. So headlights, highs and lows, turn signals, side markers, brake lights, and turn signals in the rear. This is what's left of my stock engine bay harness. I have chopped out a very good number of stuff that I'm not going to be using, so I can still utilize the factory bulkhead connector and such, so that if I have to take the front end off, I don't have to cut zip ties off the fender and string wiring and all that. I can just unbolt the bulkhead connector at the firewall as it was designed for, and then I'm going to add a couple other smaller bulkhead connectors for the little things, like I have my fan that I'm still going to be using from my old setup. It's a Durali 14-inch fan. I'm going to wire it in fresh, of course. And I have my headlights that the actual beams themselves use the factory wiring. But then I have the halos that I have some bullet connectors. I'm going to run fresh wires for those and actually wire them up for real, because before they were just kind of wired in, kind of, yeah. Go back to some of the organization I got going on. I've got just kind of general mechanical stuff, nuts, bolts, bushings and stuff that I never used or installed, some random belts and fittings and such in here. Just little kind of like raw materials of certain things, like I got a piece of metal, I've got some kind of canvas rubber thing that came from a soft top from my old Miata that I might make use of because it's still brand new material. There's a few feet of it. And then I've got electrical. Now, some of this stuff I've had, some of it I've gotten recently. I've got distribution block, I've got a mega fuse for battery stuff, I've got a new hydraulic crimping tool, I've got a heat gun finally, multimeter, this stuff, which is Tesa tape, which I will show in a future video how I'm going to utilize that. But if you just kind of Google it, it's basically high-end harness wrap tape that's meant for like oily, greasy environments, high temp, that sort of thing. I've got cables cut to length for starter, alternator, that kind of stuff, because this is going to be a race car, but its current form is kind of a hybrid stock chassis wiring, stock engine wiring that I'm going to change a couple small things on, but then the rest of that's going to be straight race car. Like I said, I've got the race car switches, switch panel going on, and just super bare bones. I'm gonna have my dash set up, is gonna be not super fancy gauges, but better than what I had before. And moving to the back, I've actually got the fuel cell finally mounted, new cap installed, fuel pump fully installed, and it's ready to be fully plumbed and wired. And it's not much to do, really. I've got supply and return, basically, positive ground for the fuel pump, and then I actually already made the breather setup. So basically I have a 150-degree AN fitting coming off. There's a check ball valve inside the tank actually already. Dash 8 line with a loop. I just figured I'll just keep it long. I can always shorten it, so I did a double loop. And then I have a 45-degree fitting that goes to a Dash 8 fitting with a breather on it under here. And it's basically just like kind of like a valve cover breather filter, essentially. But I wanted it out of the way somewhere other than just sticking out the bottom of the car, because I didn't want to deal with it maybe getting hit by something or clogging up with debris, and just, I just didn't really feel like dealing with that. So there's, a little bit of real estate back here behind the plate, and it fits right in there. And, it's out of the way. I got the battery mounted in the back here. This is a Summit battery relocation kit. It's a pretty straightforward kit. Basically, there's these long studs, and You bolt those to the car, and then you bolt the battery tie down to that, essentially. I did have to make it work with my side post battery. Long story short, I took a blowtorch and got the plastic soft and pushed it out, and now I have room for that. The kit's actually, it's meant to work with a top post battery, but it is actually a pretty legit kit. It comes with boots for both battery posts. It comes with 1 gauge cable for both the ground and the positive, and it actually comes with 7 or 8 P-clamps for running your cable as well. Now, other people might need more P-clamps, I'll be honest. I got riv nuts and hardware as well for a bunch of different stuff, so I used some of those here. Ground cable is just going to go right here. I already confirmed continuity and such for this little point here, but it keeps it off the floor of the trunk and such. And it's a nice solid point for the ground. I just got to decide how long I want this cable to be. But this is something that you can get from Summit. It comes with the cables, everything you saw there, everything but the battery, basically. And if you set it up properly with the vents and the seal, the little seal that goes underneath here and such, it will be safe for NHRA tech, depending on kind of like what level. And also depending on if you have a rear bulkhead or not. I do not technically. This is the stock rear bulkhead. It's not really a bulkhead. It's just a backing kind of thing for the seat frames. Eventually I am going to build like actual sheet metal bulkhead to be legal. So for right now, I have the box. Once I build an actual bulkhead that seals the trunk from the cabin, technically I don't think you need the box, but it is what it is. Also been working on cleaning up a couple little things here. I actually found there were these factory mounts for the harness back here that the harness had fallen off of. Factory uses literally just like electrical tape, so I used zip ties instead, and got things just cleaned up a little more to keep like wires and such kind of out, because some of these things were like hanging in front of this bracket instead of behind it. So I tucked them all up out of the way just to clean things up. Eventually, this factory harness is really crusty and such, so that's all going to be replaced one day, but for now it mostly all works, and I only really need it for the lights. I am going to run the power for the fuel pump down the side through the factory cable management and such through there. I'll probably, add a zip tie here and there, that sort of thing. And then I have my sending unit, which is part of my RCI fuel cell. This is a Speedway EFI module, by the way. It's a universal thing that fits on, I think they have a couple different ones, or they spec a couple different ones that'll fit different types of tanks and such, but this is a 16 bolt one that fits this RCI fuel cell, and it comes with the gaskets and all that. I didn't want the cap that came with this fuel cell, which is the quote aircraft style that I had on my old fuel cell, which is the one where you just flip this up and give it a twist and it pops up. But I don't really like how it's like all plastic. They tend to warp after time. You see, that's not very smooth to like pop it out. And these things don't always line up perfectly. You see how much like play and such there is with that. And I just didn't want to deal with it. So I found this also from Speedway. Kind of hard to find this actually, but I was able to get a hold of it. And it's a big, chunky, vented D-ring cap. So plenty of room for a filler and all that. It actually came with an extra gasket and all that. And it's just super satisfying. It's definitely more robust and easier to deal with. And because it's in my trunk, I don't need to like lock this or anything. They have locking versions of these that maybe people would prefer, but I just didn't care much for it. And I made a patch panel for the old hole that was cut for the sump part of the old fuel cell. It's actually quite a large hole. It's almost a foot long and like 6 or 8 inches wide or so. And it even went up into the kind of the hump part for the factory filler. So I kind of had to do a little bit of tin work here. I've never really done this kind of sheet metal work before, so I think it came out okay. And I even got some foam tape on the bottom side to help seal things. This is one big thing that I want to try and get done with this car is there's just a bunch of holes just cut for things from before. This is the old nitrous line that I still have to pull out. The old fuel line, the nitrous line that runs all the way down the car. And then I will be installing my fuel system with full -8 AN line, courtesy of Hot Rod Fuel Hose. They're really good. Here we go. Really good source for this kind of thing, and you can get fittings and such through them. The thing is that they are PTFE, so they are a little more expensive for things. You know, I got 90s and 45s and straights and all that sort of thing. So, you know, bear that in mind if you are looking at them. I'm wanting to eventually run ethanol fuel, so my fuel cell, fuel pump is all set up for ethanol safe stuff. Even the supply hose in it, I made sure to get what I hope is ethanol safe. PTFE lines, they're more expensive. They're a little bit more complicated to assemble, but it'll be worth it because basically between the fuel pump that it has installed, that'll be good to 400 or 500 horsepower on E85. But if I swap that and the injectors out, because these are just stock injectors, of course, all stock engine, the fuel lines and such themselves will support, I think, 800 to 1,000 horsepower, something like that. I'm doing full AN supply and return, so should be plenty of headroom, and I won't ever have to run the fuel line more than once. It's one thing I just don't want to do things twice 4 or 5 years from now when I'm upgrading things, you know. So I've got the engine and transmission mounted, of course. I've shown those mounts before, I believe. There's a little bit better view of them. It's basically just an adapter bracket that goes from the stock Chevy frame side mount, bolts to it. It's gusseted, it's tied in and all that, all across itself. And then there's a hole for the stock JZ engine side. There's no isolator in between. It's all solid, the engine and transmission. Currently, the transmission has the factory rubber isolators, but I'm probably eventually going to replace those for some solid ones. We'll see. I do have some research to do on that still because this is a BMW ZF 6-speed. This is a GS6-53BZ transmission, and it uses a Guibo factory, which is still on there. But I do have from Drift HQ, it's around here somewhere. Maybe it's over there. It might actually be right over there. I have a Guibo delete flange that basically converts the rubber Guibo to just a solid flange that adapts to a 4-bolt 1350 U-joint mating surface. And I'll have a drive shaft made, and that'll be the drive line. It'll be simple. I was finally able to get the shifter stuff figured out. And eventually I will get my fancy IRP short shifter all mounted up. It's going to be awesome. And, you know, we can see some of the carnage of me testing 3D printed parts that were only a 20% infill or so. And I was told not to go too hard on it, but I tried to put it into the reverse gate, which is a little more leverage, and it didn't work out. So I got stuff, you know, ready to go for the electrical system. I've got a relay box that my coworker was able to help me get started because he has the special crimp tool that I don't have. You know, I'm gonna have distribution points and all sorts of stuff. I've got cable lugs for days ready to go, some cable management stuff. This is stuff that was already in the car, actually. That's a big thing that I figured out is I cleaned up a ton of wiring under here. I got a couple more things that I got to take out, but at least it's mostly cleared out under here. There was so much stuff that was just not being used. If you follow me on Instagram, actually, you've probably seen a lot of these updates that I'm talking about, including a huge chunk of wires that I was able to just throw away, and it's such a good feeling. But this chunk of wires is going to be next. That's what I'm going to be doing, possibly partly today and basically the rest of this weekend. We'll see. But I really wanted to just give a massive update where things are at. Mounts are done. Intercooler and intake piping is done. I'm figuring out some little things for turbo lines. Little things for some wiring that I gotta move around. You know, the MAF sensor is gonna be moving over to the cold side. So I gotta strip back some of the, you know, like harnessing and stuff like that, and redo a couple things, and then redo it with my test tape over there. Like I said, I'll show that in the future here. I'm gonna be making ground straps for the engine to the subframe to the chassis, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I think also the engine to the chassis as well, just to make sure everything is tied in. Also the subframe to the core support, because there's going to be a couple grounds probably for lights and such on there as well. And just to make sure everything is nice and happy. Grounding is a huge part of any basic electrical system, especially 12-volt automotive applications. So I really just wanted to kind of take a few minutes, make this real quick, real simple video, just do a quick walk around, talk about where I'm at physically on the project, because I'm just not able to film kind of everything as I go. I got a few clips here and there, and I realized I might not be able to use them, and I just don't want to be kind of, just, oh, well, now the car's done, poof, and you just kind of skip through it. So I want to take a few minutes. Today is my birthday, and 2 years ago today is when I first revealed, like on Instagram and such, that I got the JZ, and that's the engine that I'm putting in the car. And it's been a journey. There's been a lot going on. Obviously, COVID and all the other stuff that's been going on in the world over the last 2 years has been absolutely insane. I've been blessed to not have a whole lot going on with that directly, but I started a new job. I moved and bought a house, all that stuff during all of this, during this engine swap project and all that. And, I've had some help, and, I never would have gotten here without key help from several different people. So thank you to all those people. And we're basically coming up to, not quite on, but coming up to the home stretch here. This is really where things get to the point where I got to decide how deep I want to go with things like, do I want to, like paint the engine bay? It's not really an engine bay. It's more of like a subframe and a firewall. There's not much else going on in the engine bay, but there's little things that I got to figure out if I want to do that. I already know I'm going to have to wire wheel all this stuff off of here and figure that out. So it's like, okay, well, while I'm in here, do I want to just go for it? We'll see, So originally, I really wanted the engine to be at least running by today. Actually, it would have been really cool by my birthday. Obviously, we are not there yet. But I'm hoping within maybe a month or so, this thing might be able to fire up and maybe even drive, because the only other thing after that is a drive shaft. And I at first thought that was going to be complicated, but I spoke to a local drive shaft place, and it actually might be much less complicated than I was worried. So we'll see. But thank you for hanging on and hanging around. If you've kind of been following this journey the last couple years with me, appreciate it. If you're just seeing what's going on, check out some of the other videos. Like I said, I'm trying to be a bit better, but I can only be so good and still get work done because it's just me. Basically, like I said, I have a little bit of help, but everything has basically just been me for almost all of this. So, feel free to subscribe if you like. You can follow me on Instagram. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.